We're going to go ahead and give Ransom his first bath, okay? We just gave him his first ride outside. He did really good. He's a little tired. He was kind of sweaty. This is a good time to actually go and hose him off. When I'm going to introduce water for the first time, I'm not going to do it when he's real fresh and full of beans and you know, he has no reason to want to stand still. If you do it at the end of the ride, you'll probably find you have a lot better success. You know, bathing them, trimming their feet, that type of stuff, I kind of leave that towards, you know, the second or third week, at the end of the second or start of the third week of the program, okay, or even towards the end of the third week, it doesn't really matter. What I'm saying is, don't try and bathe a wild Mustang and pick up their feet in the first 2 days, okay, because it's going to end up being a wreck. If you do all your other homework first, bathing them and trimming their feet is actually pretty easy. So to give any horse their first bath, where I don't want to do it is in a wash rack, in a tight, small claustrophobic area, because that'll make him feel trapped, it'll make him be reactive and panicked, okay? A great place to do it is kind of in an open area like this, where if he wants to move his feet and get scared and move around, he can definitely do that. But at the same time, I've still got a halter and lead rope on him, I can get him to give me 2 eyes and he can't outrun me, okay? So to begin with, I'm just going to desensitize the airspace around him. See how he doesn't like this? Very normal reaction. So I'm just going to desensitize the air around him. See how I'm letting that rope slide through my hand a little bit? I'm letting him move his feet. I'm not even going to try and touch him with the water. All I want to do is move it around him. I'm going to move him forward up here a little closer. Okay. I think the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to introduce water to their horse is actually spraying the horse down. Okay, desensitize the airspace around your horse. So he's a little worried here, and if he wants to move his feet, I'll let him. Use a little approach and retreat, okay? So don't even think about trying to touch him with the water until he's comfortable with the water being around him. Okay, I might just bring him forward just a little bit here. See, if he was tied up right now, or he was in a wash rack, he would feel a lot more trapped and claustrophobic. I don't want to do that to him. So just spray the grass around him. If he wanted to run around in a circle, I'd let him. I'd just keep his head tipped towards me. No different to what we did when we threw the rope at him. Remember when we first started throwing the rope at him, he wanted to run away from me. I kept his head tipped towards me and kept throwing the rope until he stood still and relaxed. Same thing with the stick and string. When we spanked the ground, he got worried, wanted to run away. Keep his head tipped towards you. Okay? So now he's doing a little better here. You notice my old body language is pretty relaxed. I got my leg cocked. I usually have the rope over my arm if he's not really moving away that much. Okay? You should be very relaxed with your own body language. Okay. Now what I'm going to start to do is I'll start to spray his withers and back here a little bit. I always start at the least sensitive part of their body. I'm just going to move him out of the trees there. Follow him. Now I was going to start on his withers and back, but he kind of wants to move around here a little bit, so if he's fine with it on his chest, I'll go with it on his chest. I just got to establish a starting point. There, and then retreat. And approach. And then retreat. Withers and back. And then retreat. The top line is usually the least sensitive part of their body. Up his neck, withers and back, hindquarters, neck. Then retreat. Once his top line's decent, then I'll start to go down his back legs here. Now, if he would kick at this, we would just ignore it and keep spraying him. We're not worried about us getting hurt because we're too far up in front of his shoulder here at a 45-degree angle to his shoulder. Water is a great thing to desensitize your young horses to. See, when a horse is unable to move their feet, their only other option that they feel like they have is to fight. See, when he was backing up there a little bit, I just let that rope slide through my hand. I didn't try and keep him still. Withers and back. Just keep using approach and retreat. If he wants to move around now, I'm going to let him move. See how I'm letting those feet move? I just keep following him though. Just keep following him. If I take this water away when he's moving, I'll teach him to move. Now when he stood still and cocked his leg, I took it away. And retreat. If a horse is moving their feet and being reactive and you take that pressure away, you are rewarding that behavior. So don't even think about trying to hose them off tied up for at least 5 to 10 days until they're absolutely bomb-proof to where you could drop the lead rope on the ground and bathe them and they're not going to move around. Okay, and then what I'd do is I'd hook them up to one of our tie rings. Okay, and then bathe them with it, just in an open area. And then after they're good with that, then you could get them in the wash rack on a tie ring. Now I'm not going to worry about his face. I don't do their face until their body is really good. He's still too tense around his body just yet. So probably in 3 or 4 days, we could start with his face. But when I do their face, I would not use this nozzle. What I would do is take the nozzle off the hose and have somebody turn the volume of the water coming out of the hose way down. And then what I'll usually do, I'll just kind of simulate it, is I'll just kind of have it trickling out. And I'll just hold it up and put it between their eyes here and just let it run down their face. And initially, what do? They throw their head up in the air and they get worried. Well, I just try my best to keep the hose right there. And as soon as they lower their head and relax, what do? Retreat and take it away. Then do it again. Usually what I do is I'll like kink the hose like that. And when I want to use the water, I'll take the kink out. When I retreat, I'll kink it and take the hose away. And then you do that, and then you'll start in the middle of their head, then over their eye, up around their ears here. Be careful not to get it in their ears. And then as they get more comfortable with that, then you can start letting more of the water come out of the hose. Turn the hose on with a little bit more pressure. And then after a week of doing that, you can have just the end of the hose off, the nozzle off, and just spray, hose off down their around their face. And a week later, you can stand there and spray their face, and they'll just stand there with their head down. The biggest thing that horses don't like water around their face is people stand back here and they do that to them. They just spray it in their face. And when the horse reacts badly, then they take the water away. Okay? Don't do that. Okay? Because all you're doing is rewarding them for throwing their head up. But see, it's hard to control when it's got a nozzle on it like this. Okay? That's why I take the nozzle off, turn the water volume way down, and then kink the hose so I can control it a little bit better. But he's not ready for his face. Don't worry about the head until the body is really, really good. See, the fact that he just flinched a little bit just then tells me that his body's still not comfortable with this. Okay? When his body's not comfortable, certainly his head's not going to be comfortable. But overall, he did pretty good. But don't worry about doing this on the second day. Okay? Do it after you've got them pretty broke and they're using the think inside their brain, they're through the fundamentals, and then it's a lot easier. What I'd like to do now, mate, is introduce Ransom to the snaffle bit under saddle. Now, up to this point, what we've done is we've given him his first ride outside. You saw yesterday how we took him outside. He did really good. He was soft, he's supple. He's ready now to move on to the snaffle bit. Now, up to this point, we've let him wear the snaffle bit, meaning that we put the bridle on, we took the reins off, and just let him wear it. When I first introduced the snaffle bit, I usually just let him wear it anywhere from 12 hours to 24 hours, okay? Now, if I put it on him during the day, and at the end of the day I come back to take the bridle off of them, they're still mouthing the bridle and putting their tongue over the bit and just kind of look like they feel awkward with it being in their mouth, I'm going to leave it on again all night and take it off the next day. Okay, the longest I've ever had to leave a bit on a horse is 24 hours, but I'll let them eat with it, drink with it, etc. I leave it on until the horse acts like it's not a big deal whatsoever to be wearing the bit. At that particular point, that's when you can start asking the horse to flex and bend with the bit on the ground. I never ride them with the snaffle bit until they're flexing really well on the ground first. So in the last 2 days, we've been letting him wear it, okay, while we've been preparing him with our groundwork. So I've taught him how to flex with the bit, okay? Now, keep in mind, when you first pick up with the snaffle bit, okay, it's going to be a lot like the halter. When you first pick up, they're more than likely going to want to resist against that. So just hold it. When you get a little give, release it. and then pick up again. When you get a little bit more, release it. Now he's coming all the way around, of course, because we've already taught this to him, but I want to make it clear to you, when you first teach them how to flex with the snaffle bit, even though they're really good with this, with the halter, they're probably going to be a little bit worse when you first do it with the bit. So don't look for a big give. Like, just start out when their nose is up, and as soon as they drop it, release it. And then they'll drop it a little further and release it, and then a little bit further, until eventually they can touch their belly. But don't ask them to flex or pull on the bit until their mouth is what I call quiet. See how he's not chomping on the bit and gapping his mouth, all that kind of stuff. If your horse is still doing any of that stuff, he's not ready for you to flex him. Also, once you teach him how to flex from side to side, make sure you can do it from the opposite side, because this will simulate what's going to happen when you get on him, okay? Now, if you've already done a really good job flexing your horse with the hackamore and the halter, this shouldn't take very long to get your horse to respond like this, okay, and get him to give. Now, typically, I'll transfer a horse from a hackamore over to a bridle somewhere between the 10th and 14th ride, okay? Sometimes I'll do it earlier than that, sometimes I'll do it later than that. It just kind of depends on the individual, but as a general rule, somewhere between 10 and 14 rides, okay? If I would do it later than that, if I've got a horse that just seems to be a little bit green in the hackamore, doesn't quite understand how to flex good enough, and I feel like he just needs a little bit more time, not a problem. You can ride him 20 times, 20 rides in the hackamore before you change him over. It's not the end of the world. I will change him over earlier if I feel like I'm not being effective, okay? If you've got a real thick type of a horse, as far as thick skin, like you've got a big warm blood or a Belgium draft horse or fjord, horses that kind of have a lot more thickness to their skin, and just basically, in all honesty, they're just not as sensitive as, say, a thoroughbred or an Arab, okay? Now, see how he is wanting to lay down here, okay? That's good and bad. It's good in the fact that he wants to lay down around me shows that he's not worried about me. But see what I'm going to do here? Wait. I'm going to let him commit to the mistake, and then I'm just going to go ahead and move his feet. Now, the fact that he actually wanted to lay down there is in some ways a good sign, because it tells me that he's not worried about me, he's not frightened of me. Remember when we first tried to lay him down when he was wild, he didn't want to lay down, did he? Because he didn't trust us. The fact that he wants to lay down now voluntarily shows us that he's not worried about us, he's not frightened of us, and he doesn't perceive us to be a predator. Bad news is I don't want him to roll on my saddle, so when he went to go down, I went to move his feet. Okay, a lot of people would say, don't lay down, don't lay down. I'm going to say, hey, you can lay down, but every time you go to lay down, I'm going to move your feet. Hard for a horse to lay down when he's moving his feet, okay? But anyway, if you've got a horse that's not very sensitive and you just feel like you're flexing and flexing with that hackamore and he's not quite taking it seriously, he's not respecting it and really trying to move off it, then I'll go ahead and move him into a snaffle bit earlier on, because a snaffle bit has got a lot more sensitivity in the horse's mouth. The horse's mouth is a lot more sensitive than their nose. So if I have got a horse that's very kind of naturally heavy and dull and not very sensitive, I usually can get a better result going to a snaffle bit earlier on. Okay, I'd rather have the right tool and be effective than the wrong tool and be ineffective, okay? So if the tool that I'm not using isn't working or getting my point across, I'll change to a tool that does work. It's kind of like I tell people this. If I shoot somebody with a gun and they get up, next time I get a bigger gun. Okay, I don't, you know, if I shoot somebody, I don't want them to get back up again. So if I'm flexing and don't feel like I'm getting what I need done, I'm going to change to a different tool, okay? So once you've got your horse wearing the snaffle bit, and I usually do that initially without the reins, okay? I'll just put the bridle on. Now I'm going to actually start to do some groundwork with the McCarty reins, okay? Now the reason why I like to use the McCarty reins is because it's like a built-in lead rope, okay? It doesn't matter where I go, what my horse is doing, I've always got a lead rope that I can go ahead and move his feet, okay? So just initially, I don't have the reins on when I'm just letting him wear it when I'm doing the groundwork and letting him wear the bit and I'm flexing him. Now he's at a point now where he's got to get used to those reins flapping around and the feeling of having something pulling his mouth as his feet are moving. Now keep in mind, you also want to be able to put some corona in the corners of your horse's mouth. When you first start putting the bit on them, after 2 or 3 days, don't be surprised, especially like with an Arab or a thoroughbred, that very, very sensitive skin, if they get a little red and irritated in the corners of their mouth, okay? I'll just put a little Corona cream in there. And in fact, I put Corona cream on the corners of my horse's mouth before I put a bit in their mouth every day. Even Mindy, Diaz, doesn't matter how old they are, I'll always go ahead and put Corona in their mouth just before I ride them. It just keeps their mouth soft and stops them from getting chapped in the corners of their mouth, okay? So if they do get a little red in the corners of their mouth, don't make a big deal of it. It's not a big deal. Just put a little cream on it and look the other way, okay? In 3 or 4 days, they'll be used to it and they won't be irritated on the corners of their mouth. It's just kind of like, you know, if you're an office worker and your hands are very soft and I give you a shovel and tell you to dig a hole, your hands are going to get very bloody and blistered very quickly because you're not used to, your skin is very soft there, okay? So what I'm going to do with him now is just do some basic groundwork exercises and make sure he gets used to those reins swinging back and forth. Now, even though he's used to the reins, he's never had anything swinging in his mouth, okay? Now, a lot of people say, well, how does the horse know how to circle to the right when the rein comes out of the left-hand side of the bit? They just figure it out. You know, if your horse doesn't figure it out, he's not going to figure much out else anyway, but they just figure it out by themselves. Yield, point, okay? So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time doing a little bit of groundwork here, making sure that I know how he's going to react when that bit's pulled on him. See, up till now, I've only flexed him with the bit. I've never actually asked him to soften and give to it while his feet have been moving. Step in front. Come on, move those feet. He was a little lazy there with his front end. So see there when I pull on the bit, see how he gaps his mouth a little bit? That's very common in the beginning when they're not used to having that bit being pulled on. So you can make a figure 8 of the reins and take it back over their head. I usually just leave it loose like this because I want them to flop around a little bit. Step. Okay. Yield. Do a little bit of a C pattern exercise. Point. Yield. Just recap all the things that he already knows, but make sure he'll do it with the bridle. I want to make sure when he feels that bit being pulled on in his mouth, he doesn't react badly to it. A little lazy there. So far, pretty good reaction. Okay, like right there, he'll gap a little bit. Okay. I don't worry about him gapping or opening his mouth because that's going to go away in a couple of days once he gets used to having that bit pull on his mouth, okay? That's not going to be something that is going to be a problem. We do a little bit of stirrup driving with him. Okay. Again, this gives him an opportunity to pick up on this bit and bend his head a little bit. Okay. Yield his hindquarters. That's it. Give to that bit as he yields. Change hands. The snaffle bit will just get you a lot more softness, okay? Can you ride a horse in a hackamore for the rest of his life? The answer is yes. Can you ride him in a halter for the rest of their life? Yes. But you're never going to get the level of softness and collection out of a horse without going to some sort of a bit. Okay? Now I like to use just a 3/8 of an inch smooth snaffle. I don't want a snaffle bit that's thicker than 3/8 of an inch because if it is, they'll lean on it too much. Like you see some of those English egg butt snaffles, a really, really thick mouthpiece. The thicker the mouthpiece, the more the horse has a tendency to lean on it. Okay? I'll use a leather curb strap underneath the snaffle bit like I've got here, and that stops the bit from sliding through the horse's mouth if the horse would gap his mouth. So it's very important to have that curb strap on. The curb strap is loose, like I can easily get, yield, I can easily get 4 fingers underneath his chin here, so it's not tight. It's not designed to help turn the horse or stop the horse. All it does is stop the horse from having that bit slide through his mouth if he'd gap his mouth. Yield his hindquarters. That's it. Remember, it's much harder for a horse to soften when their feet are going forward or moving. So now I'm going to do a little bit of pick up. There, when he drops that nose down, release it. Introduce a little bit of bridle bending to him a little bit. There we go. Teach him to follow his nose from this bit. There. I like that, how he's starting to drop that nose down. There we go. Yield his hindquarters. Bring his front end through. You'll just find when you transfer them over to a bit, initially they'll feel worse for a day or two. But then when you keep flexing them, they just get softer and softer. I'm bumping him in the belly because I want him to bend his rib cage more on this side. There we go. I want him to bend around me. He's kind of stiff here, so I'm going to make him go forward. There we go. I like that. I'm going to flex him. Wait till he stops. There. Good boy. Very good. Okay, let me check my girth. Right, it's nice and firm. Okay. Bend his head and we'll get on him. Now, as soon as I get on, I want to go back to our flexing, just like we did with the Hackamore. Basically, the first ride or two with the snaffle bit just basically recaps everything we've already showed him in the Hackamore. Now, initially, don't be surprised if they're a little bit worse when you put that bit on them, okay? When you start flexing them, they'll feel a little heavier. And you'll think, man, my horse is better in a Hackamore. Just be patient, keep working with them, keep flexing them a lot, and you'll actually find that they get softer. So what I'm going to do here is soften him up here. I'm going to work on our one rein stops, our yield to stop, our bending, get him moving his feet. Notice up to this point, we still haven't pulled on two reins. Okay, do not pick up on two reins until they're soft laterally first. Now, if he feels a little bit heavy on the snaffle, like he's just kind of a little lazy there, I will jerk on it a little bit and thump on him, just like I did the Hackamore, if I feel like he's just kind of being lazy and he's not really putting in the effort. But notice how I'm sliding my fingers down very lightly, okay? Always give him a chance, okay? Let's go ahead and yield his hindquarters. He's a little lazy here, so I'm going to whack that butt there. Expect when you put him back into a snaffle for the first time that they're probably not going to be as good at each exercise. See here, he knows better than this. There. It's what they are in a Hackamore. So I know that, you know, he's probably only going to be 70% as good as he was now today in the bit than what he was the Hackamore yesterday. It's just new for him, okay? So you got to understand that when you go to put it on and you go to work with them again, they're going to seem a little bit distracted maybe, not paying quite as much attention. Press, there, that's better. There we go. See how he's a little stiff there on that bit? I'm going to wait till he drops his nose down. There, before I take my leg off. Okay, so what the bit does is it allows you to get a lot more picky about that softness. There, release it. There we go. I want them to bend and soften to that bit. Excellent. Okay, we'll go work on some of our one rein stops. Sit and relax. Good, he stopped. Now right then, he kind of felt a little heavy on this, so I'm going to bump him on it a little bit firmer there. But again, always remember to pick up lightly. If you've done a really good job with preparing the horse with the Hackamore first, introducing him to the snaffle bit is very, very easy, okay? Now, have I had colts that I started in a snaffle bit right from the beginning? The answer is yes. I've done lots and lots of them. Okay, but if I had a choice between doing it with a Hackamore first for 10 to 14 rides, then a snaffle, as opposed to just going straight to a snaffle, I would probably do the Hackamore first. And especially for teaching people, it's almost It's very difficult for people to get into a wreck with a hackamore. But if you get on a young colt for the first ride or two and you lose your balance and you snatch on his face or you jerk on him real hard by accident, he might rear up and flip over backwards because his mouth is very sensitive. But if you jerk too hard on a hackamore or you lose your balance and you pull harder than what you should, okay, it's very difficult to get a colt scared in a hackamore. I'm going to sit and relax. There. It's very hard to get a colt scared in a hackamore, but you can get them scared very, very quickly in a snaffle bit. Lope him off, sit and relax. There, I love that. Okay. So I just want to check out how he's feeling in this bit. I was very, very happy. See him gap in his mouth here when I pick up on that rein? That's very normal. He's never had it picked up before. There. I want to make sure, but he understands it's the same rules apply. I do the pulling, you do the giving. So I was very happy with him yesterday with his first ride out, okay? See this little stiffness here? See him gap in his mouth here? There, release it when he comes around. There, release it. That's very normal what he just did just then. That's him saying, hey, I don't know how to bend and soften with this thing in my mouth. And I'm like, well, you'll figure it out. Just keep going. There. So when I picked up on that left rein, he kind of got a little ugly and lifted his head up there. Very, very normal. There, I like that. Pull to your hip, release to your knee. That's the boy. A little stiff here, see that stiffness? Stiffness, stiffness. There, he got soft. I release it to my knee. I'm fanatical about giving back to them. When they get soft, you've got to give that slack back to them. That's their reward. Okay, we'll try some transitions. Sit down and relax. I love how much he's listening to my seat. Okay. Okay, he's really been paying a lot more attention, okay, to my seat. That's it. When I sit down and relax, he relaxes. I love that. As soon as I sit down, he stops. So I'm feeling pretty confident he's kind of handling this well. What I'd like to do with him here pretty soon is just take him back outside on his second ride and just repeat everything that we did yesterday. But from now on, see that stiffness? See that there? Watch my left hand. Watch. I'm going to use my inside leg a little bit. There. I was using my inside leg a little bit to bend his rib cage. Okay, he's at the stage now where he kind of needs spurs on him at this point. Like, he's responsive enough that when I squeeze, he goes somewhere. Okay, but I'd like to use spurs on him here pretty soon to where I can get him to bend his body a lot more around me. Get control of those 5 body parts. There we go. Okay, so for the next probably 3 rides, all I'm going to do is repeat what we've already done with this horse, okay? If you want, it wouldn't hurt to ride him in the arena 1 or 2 days with just a snaffle bit, repeating the exercises, and then go down the road. But he's doing so well, but I don't see any reason why on a day like today I couldn't take him back out down the road again for his second ride, okay? So, when do I start with the vertical flexion? Well, that just depends on how they're doing with their lateral, okay? I would suspect in about 2 days' time, riding with the snaffle bit, he'll be more than ready to be pulled on with 2 hands and start to get his face vertically. And again, basically what we're doing is we're following that fundamental series, aren't we, at this particular point, okay? But I'm going to cheat a little bit and just show you a little bit of vertical flexion, just how I'd start it. But I caution you, do not go to the vertical flexion too soon. Make sure that they're nice and light laterally first. That's the big key to it that people miss. They try to get their head down before they get them soft laterally. So I'm going to pick up on the bit. I'm going to ask him to give vertically. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm just going to hold him. And he's probably going to fight against it a little bit and lean on it. And as soon as he gets off it, I'm going to throw the reins away. He's pulling on that bit right now. He's pulling on it. He's pulling on it. Get ready. He's pulling on it. He's pulling on it. I'm just holding those reins. He's pulling on it. It's up to him to get off this. I'm just going to wait, nearly. He's thinking about giving. He's pulling. There, just a little bit, release it. Now, it wasn't great, his release just then, but it was a starting point. And then I always come back and flex him again laterally. 1, 2, tip his nose, 3, 4. He's got to understand, now when he feels 2 reins, tuck his nose in vertically. And again, we go into a lot of detail on this on the fundamental series, okay, but I'm just going to touch on it right now. Hold it. Tighten one rein up if I have to make him feel a bit more uncomfortable. It's really pulling. There, release it. Okay, notice that when I release it, I throw the reins away. I quickly release. Remember, the quicker you can release, the quicker he learns, the lighter he gets. 1, 2, tip his nose on 3, even it up on 4. My hands are down low on my legs. The lower my hands are, the more leverage I get. Don't out-muscle him, out-weight him. Get ready. There. Release again. So he's now just, I'll kind of go to the side here, he's now just starting to figure out that if he drops his nose down, I'll let go of the reins. You know what horses dream about? Us not pulling on them. Okay? So let's show him that if he just gets off this bit, we'll quit pulling on him. He's pulling against it, pulling against it. See, this is where people may want to start jerking on him or getting after him for not giving. Just wait, let it be his idea. Especially when you're teaching him. I might tighten one rein up if I don't think he's uncomfortable enough. There, he dropped it down. Good boy. So he's a little green for this. He really needs this in about 2 more rides, okay? So I'm cheating a little bit by doing it now, but I want to show it to you, okay, before we end the series of showing you how to get that little bit of vertical on them. If they have a tendency to just hang there, tighten one rein a little bit more so they're not quite straight. That just unbalances that bit in their mouth, and it's easy for a horse to lean on something when they're perfectly straight and balanced. It's like, you know, pulling him off balance. Remember how when I put the lariat around his neck, I'd pull him off to the side, get him off balance. Don't pull from straight ahead. There. And gave there. Good boy. 1, 2, 3, 4. By getting your hands down low, you get more leverage. Just pulling against it. He's waiting for me to drop the reins. I'm not going to drop the reins until he gives to it. So it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game initially. Right. Right. Not yet. Nearly. Hold those reins there. There. And then release it. Okay. So once I get him good at the standstill, of course, then you could try the same thing at the walk, except that's what we call draw to a stop. Okay? I'm going to do it one time, but again, make sure you understand that you've got to do your preparation first. So he's a little bit stiffer so far on this left side. So if I was going to stop him with 2 reins, 1, 2, 3, 4, I do that. But you don't start this until they're doing better at the standstill. He's just starting to catch on at the standstill. He's not real good, but he's catching on. Tighten one rein up. Tighten it up again if I need to. Pull the other one a little bit more. You know, if I feel like he's not uncomfortable enough and he's just sitting there having a cigarette reading Black Beauty, I'm going to make him feel more there, uncomfortable. Good boy. Rightio, he's doing great. Well, mate, it's about time that we trim Ransom's feet. His feet have been in terrible shape. They're very, very long, kind of broken off, and that's what happens. You know, everybody says when you have a Mustang, they have perfect feet. Mustang have really good feet when they're out in the wild because they're wearing them down constantly. But as soon as you catch them and you domesticate them and you feed them and you keep them in small lots and where they can't get to moving around and wearing that hoof wall off, okay, then they turn into regular domesticated horses' feet where they get real long, splayed out, get a lot of flaring on them, okay? So I've deliberately left his feet to pretty much the end of the series is because I don't worry about the feet until I've got everything else done. When you get everything else done first and you get the horse respectful, using the thinking side of his brain, he's not worried about you or defensive, then usually the feet are not a problem at all. Now for the last, probably 10 days, we've been picking his feet up, rubbing them, lots of preparation have been going into this, but now we're actually going to go ahead and trim his feet. Now I'm only going to do 2 feet on this particular horse and I'll do the other 2 off camera. And we're not going to turn this into a hoof trimming, segment of the program where I'm going to show you all the tips and everything you need to do, but I'm just going to give you kind of a general overlay of what I believe in. I do a lot of the barefoot trimming on our ranch. I've been doing it now for almost 8 years now, and there's different programs that you can follow on the barefoot trimming, and I follow a guy called Pete Ramey. And Pete's program, as far as I'm concerned, is the very best in keeping horses sound. It's easy to follow, it's simple, you can learn how to do it yourself and trim your own horses, that's for sure. Now I'm not saying that I've turned into one of these natural tree huggers where, I'm against all horseshoes and totally natural. Anytime I think you become excessive in anything, I think you become an idiot. It's just that simple, okay? So do I still shoe some of my horses? Sure I do. Like I shoe all my reining horses and cow horses with sliding plates behind so they can slide across the ground when they stop, okay? Am I opposed to putting shoes on the front of a horse if I need to? If I've got to sell a horse and they're a little bit sore, or, I'm going to go out in rocky terrain and I don't have time to go through that transitional period, sure I'll put shoes on them. So I'm not one of these people that are going to sit here and say all farriers are bad and shoes are the end of the world, because they're certainly not, okay? However, in 9 times out of 10, the majority of my horses on the ranch don't have shoes on them, or if they do have shoes on them, they only have hind shoes on them, okay? I've found over the years that basically if you're willing to go through the transitional process, and it's usually anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to transition a horse from shoes to not having shoes, okay? If you're willing to go through that transitional period and ride them with the protective boots, okay, that keep their feet, nice when you're out in a rocky trail and stuff like that, usually then after that transitional period, you could ride them on rocks for the rest of their life and they're never going to have a problem. But most people get frustrated because they think they're going to be able to take a horse that's been wearing shoes his entire life, rip the shoes off and then take him up the Rocky Mountain the next day, and they're mad because he's lame or he's not going to handle it real well. There is a transitional period that their feet have to toughen up, okay? So I'm not going to say that I'm by far anywhere near as good as Peter trimming horses' feet, but we do all our own horses here on the ranch. We've been doing it for several years and we've had great success with it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we kind of do. What I'm not going to do with him is trim his feet up to where I exactly want them to be. Because the trick is, just do it in little stages. If you just whack off a bunch of foot, okay, that's when they'll go lame a lot of the time, when you get too aggressive about it. And I've made that mistake previously when we started doing this. So where I want him to be, I'm not going to get to there today. I'm going to probably get halfway there today, or a little past halfway, and then I'm going to see how he does for a week. And then next week, I'm going to trim a little bit more off. And then the following week, I'll probably get his feet to be where I want them to be. Typically, we trim our horses' feet that we're riding them every 4 weeks. Brood mares, yearlings, stuff like that, we do them every 5 or 6 weeks out in the pasture, okay? But horses that I'm riding, we like to do them every 4 weeks. I like to keep their feet nice and short, okay? There's been a lot of talk about diet in these horses plays a big part in their feet, which I think it does, but I'm a firm believer that you can still feed your horse a lot of grain, you can still feed him a lot of alfalfa and rich foods and still have a healthy foot, especially if you trim it the right way. I don't believe you have to put your horse on an old dry dusty hay diet for his feet to be good, okay? So at this stage, I don't expect a lot of problems from him, but we'll see what happens. We've already taught him that when we squeeze his ergot, he should pick his foot up. Now you can see here okay, on his foot, he's got a lot of toe on him, doesn't he? See all this excess foot here? So his feet are very, very long. He's almost starting to get curled up here. See all the flaring on this top side? So he's got a lot of foot here, okay? I want to take a lot of that off, but I can't be too aggressive the first time round. So when I've got one that everything's going good, I'll usually either keep it over my elbow like this, so that way if I need to, I can drop the foot and I've still got a hold of him, okay? So I'm just going to start knocking some of this foot down, okay? Now if he wants to eat a little bit like that, I'm not too worried about that, as long as he doesn't take off anywhere or move around. So what I like to do as a quick trim is I'll do like a 45-degree angle trim, and as I get further back towards the heels, I flatten it off more. Okay? So I start out at a 45-degree angle. I recommend that you get Peter Ramey's book and video on hoof trimming. It's very easy to follow. Like I said, you don't have to be a professional farrier to make it work for you. There we go. And as I get further back towards the heels, I flatten it off more. And then what I can do is I'll just take it more of a 90-degree angle up and down like that. It saves you a lot of rasping. Okay. And this is just kind of a quick trim that I'll do on one where I know I'm going to have to do more the next week. Okay. He's just got a lot of flaring. And that's what happens when they're kept in captivity and they don't get a chance, their feet aren't trimmed regularly, and they don't get a chance to wear it off. Now when I drop the foot, I usually do it just like that, is I just drop it, okay, and let it be. Let's just say that he started moving around or fussing or fidgeting, okay? I'll do some things like this where I'll actually go ahead and use my nippers or the rasp and move that hindquarters around. Come on, hustle that butt, hustle that butt, hustle that butt. And then I immediately go back to picking it up again. I make this look like the easy part, okay? So if you've got one that wants to fuss around, don't be frightened to just go ahead and move their feet. Now that we've knocked off a lot of that excess foot with the nippers, we'll go ahead and rasp it, okay? What I want to do is just basically, I'm just going to leave this on the ground here. He's being pretty good here, okay? Is I'm just going to kind of round these edges about now. I don't really want to take a lot more off, okay? Take these heels down just a little bit. But I just want to round those edges because it's rounding those edges that stop the foot from chipping away, okay? Right. Okay. Not too bad there. Now, I would normally want to take him back quite a bit more, but like I said, we're just going to do it in stages because I don't want to have to stop riding him. So now I'm going to bring it out in front and see if I can address some of this flaring here. See how you want the upper third to match the lower 2/3. Where the hoof wall comes down, there you go, buddy. Where that hoof wall comes down, you see when it gets down past about the first third, it really starts flaring out. So this is where I want to rasp this now. okay, and address a lot of this flaring. You want the lower 2/3 to match the upper 2/3. So now it's just important that you round all of it, and again, that stops it from chipping away. Now, I would normally want to back his toe up a lot more and get him a lot more underneath himself, but I have to resist the temptation to take too much off again in his first trimming, especially because I don't want him to go sore or lame. You're better off not taking quite enough off, coming back 2 or 3 days later and taking a little bit more off, than taking too much off and now they're lame for a week, and then, you know, eventually they're going to come sound again after a week or two later, but you can't ride them in the meantime, or you have to have boots on them, okay? So with him, I'm just going to basically shorten his feet up to where I want him to be over a period of about 3 weeks, okay? But what I tried to show you is there, when they start fussing and moving around, you go and move their feet around. Yield their hindquarters around. Do a little lunging to stage 1, lunging stage 2. Drive their front around the rear. But the trick is, as soon as you get done moving their feet, immediately go back and pick up their foot. So it's like option A, stand there and rest while I trim your feet. Option B, run around and lose weight. So between the two options, option A looks a lot better, doesn't it? But if you let the horse stop and rest for 30 seconds before you pick his foot up, then there's an option C, and they'll pick that one, which is neither of the above. Okay, so make sure you go from one extreme to the other, and it doesn't take very long of doing that, and those horses start getting like, hey man, I just want to stay still, leave me alone, etc. So very much get good at being able to move their feet, go back to trimming them, move their feet, go back to trimming them. Make the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. Okay, but if you're smart, you'll do this towards the end of your training session anyway. After you've already ridden them, they're kind of tired, they're sweaty, they're wanting to stand still, that'd be a good time to do the first trimming on your horse. Not after he's been walked out of his stall and he's had 3 days off and he's fed 5 buckets of corn every day and he's breathing fire. Okay, of course he's not going to want to stand still. So you have to use your head a little bit here and set your horse up for success. Okay mate, now we're going to go ahead and do a hind foot, okay? Now you might have noticed on that last one that I didn't really address anything with the sole. I didn't trim much away or mess with the sole. To be perfectly honest, I don't at all, okay? When I say at all, if there's a big, you know, dead piece of frog that's ready to come off, I might rip that off. But as a general rule, I don't mess with the sole at all. For years, I always tried to get that nice concave sole and, you know, get the coffin bone up in the foot a lot more, and I'd mess with the sole, and it's almost like the more I messed with the sole, the lamer they would get. And when I finally said, you know what, I'm going to address the hoof wall and the balance of the foot overall, and I'm going to let the underneath take care of itself, my horses got a lot sounder and their feet got a lot tougher. Okay, and I did notice, especially moving down here to Texas where my horses are turned out a lot more on sandier soil, I do notice that they got a lot more concavity to their feet than what they ever did when I lived in Ohio. Because up in Ohio, I used to have them in pens a lot from like November through April, because it rained so much you have to lock them up in dry lots, and their feet would get very flat. I noticed that. But since I moved down here, they got a lot more concavity to their feet. I didn't do anything. I just noticed a different part of the country that walking around on that sand seemed to help them quite a bit. Okay, but I think the more you mess with the sole, the bigger trouble people get into. And I know that at least that's what happened for myself. So for about the last 5 years, I kind of don't really address anything with it at all. And my horses have been perfectly sound. I can take any of them up the rockiest terrain for all day, and they're never going to take a lame step. So what I say is, if your horse ain't lame, something must be going right. Because if he is lame, something's going wrong. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pick his back foot up, squeeze that hock. That's the boy. Okay. So you can see here, see all this flaring out all around here? Okay, he's not as long on his hind foot, but it's all flared out over here. The fact that he's wanting to eat grass there a little bit is not a bad sign. He's obviously pretty relaxed with what's going on. I just want to round this out. This is a big part that I'm fanatical about, is rounding it, because when you roll it all, they won't chip away. When you don't roll it, it for sure will. This is my little dog Vito. Isn't it funny? As soon as you start trimming feet, what do the dogs do? The dogs show up. It's like bait, isn't it? Hey, you're looking for some hoof, aren't you? Okay. His name's Vito. He's been returned to the pound 3 times. So that's how his name is Vito. Okay. Rightio. And I'm his 4th owner, but I haven't returned him just yet. But he's still on probation. Okay. So that's a lot better there. Good boy. I love how relaxed his leg is. Okay. Let's bring him around here a little bit. He has a lot more flaring on this outside here. He doesn't have much flaring on the inside at all. I'm just going to go and round this up. And that'll do it until next week. Good boy. See, a lot of people say, well, Clinton, don't you think it's dangerous leaving a lead rope on the ground like this? Not really, because he's broke. That's what broke horses do. They're not a big problem. But I didn't, remember when I started handling his feet, did I leave the lead rope on the ground like that? Heck no, I had it on my arm, didn't I? We used approach and retreat. You're seeing the end product of what a horse is like with the down under horsemanship method. They're relaxed, they're quiet. So if he did start to wander around and want to eat too much grass or not pay attention, again, I'm going to go put his feet back to work. Like if he's leaning into me, I might go and do this. Drive that front away. Move that front, move that front, move that front, move that front. Okay? And then immediately go back to picking up his feet again. I love how just overall relaxed he is. He's not really a wild Mustang anymore. He's just like an old broke kid's pony now. And that's what we're looking for. So he did really good. So I only did 2 feet. I'll do the other 2 off camera. Keep in mind, you're better off doing too little and come back next week and do a little bit too more than doing too much and end up with a lame horse. Okay, mate? Colt starting can be a lot of fun, okay? But at different times, it can be also very dangerous at times as well, okay? And if you make a mistake in that first 6 weeks of starting a colt, depending on how bad the mistake is and how long it goes on for, it can be a habit that can be extremely difficult to fix. So to me, in the first 6 weeks of a horse's life under saddle, I really want things to go really well, okay? I don't want them to develop in any bad habits. So what I'm gonna do now is just kind of go over some of the biggest mistakes that I think people make in starting colts, okay? The first one is not leaving the saddle on long enough, okay? The worst thing you can do is saddle them up for an hour or 2 and then take the saddle off. When I first saddle them, again, I'll leave that saddle on for a good 10 to 12 hours. I do not take the saddle off until they've wore it all day and they're completely comfortable with it. If I come back at the end of the day and they're still wanting to buck with the saddle and be spooky and all that kind of stuff, I leave it on all night. That's why we use an old saddle that if they roll on it, we don't care. Okay, but don't, even if your colt accepts it well, let's just say you saddle him and he doesn't buck and he couldn't care less, still leave it on him all day anyway. Let him give a chance to wear it and make sure he's turned out in a big enough area that he can move his feet. Okay, if he's in just a little area like a horse stall or a very, very small round pen, you're kind of tricking yourself. You've got to let him move his feet to see how he's really going to react to it. Okay, so make sure you saddle him long enough that they get used to it, and don't take that saddle off until they just think it grew out of their back and they're completely comfortable with it. Remember, mate, after the first day you saddle them, if they want to buck, they can buck that first saddling. But after that, that second day onwards, do not let them get in a habit of wanting to buck with the saddle, because if you do, that's what they'll do. They'll think that every time they're saddled up, they're allowed to buck, okay? So from the second saddling onwards, if they go to buck with the saddle, what do? Redirect their feet, okay? Do lunging for respect stage 2, okay? Move those feet, keep changing directions. It's hard for a horse to keep bucking if you keep making him change directions and yield his hindquarters or move his forequarters, okay? So very, very important. First time you let them buck, that's a free pass. They can do what they want that first saddling, but after that, shut it down immediately. I don't tie them up and saddle them or tie them up with the saddle on for probably 2, almost 3 weeks. I want them pretty broke and quiet and comfortable with the saddle before I ever try to tie them up with the saddle, whether I'm saddling them or unsaddling them, okay? Remember, when you tie a horse up, you've taken away their ability to move their feet, especially if you don't use an Aussie tie ring. It's not as bad if you use an Aussie tie ring, because if they panic and then when they move their feet, they're able to a certain degree, okay? But I don't want to saddle them tied up to a fence or a pole until they're really good about being saddled out here in the open. And then after that, I'd put them on a tie ring on the fence where they still don't feel like they're trapped and claustrophobic. You don't want to saddle them in cross ties or in the middle of the barn aisle, or, you know, when I'm saddling a colt for the first 2 weeks, I'm very conscious of where I saddle him, because I'm saying to myself, okay, if this horse would start to buck, do I have room to move his feet? Yes or no? Well, if I'm obviously in the middle of the barn aisle, I probably don't. If I'm in cross ties, I probably don't. If he's tied up to a big old oak tree and he goes to buck, I probably don't have room to move his feet around, okay? So I asked myself that question, do I have room to move his feet around? The next question I asked myself is, if it went really badly and he started bucking or reared up and tried to flip over, am I gonna get hurt, or is he gonna get hurt, or what wreck are we gonna get into? You know, saddling your horse in a cross tie, for example, and he goes to buck and he rears up and gets his foot over the chain and flips over. I've seen every wreck that people can do. So make your horse absolutely prove to you he's safe and quiet and comfortable with the saddle. So spend 2 or 3 weeks saddling him out in an open area. So that way, if you run into trouble, you've got room to move his feet. And then you can slowly start moving him into more of a claustrophobic area. But don't start with that too early, because you're only going to get into a wreck, okay? Now remember, make sure you have a helper help you for the first 2-3 rides in the round pen. Don't try to do it all by yourself, because if you do, you're going to have a tougher time getting those horses' feet to move out, okay? So if you have to, and the person on the ground might be a little bit inexperienced, why don't you do a trial run on an old quiet horse? You get on an old quiet one and you simulate everything you're going to do with that colt. That way you two can kind of have a little bit of a dress rehearsal of what's going to happen, so that you know what you need to do ahead of time, okay? That never ever hurts. Like yesterday, when we took him out on the road, we'd never done that before. We'd never tried to film a horse outside on the road like that before, going down and the wind and the movement of the camera and all that stuff. So before we did it with him, we did a dress rehearsal. We went out there with another horse, we practiced everything so that we could coordinate between us and the cameraman and producer how we're gonna start and stop and go and all that type of stuff, because we'd never done it before and we were all kind of a little inexperienced how we're going to get this done going down the road, you know, 20 mile an hour kind of a deal. So we did a little dress rehearsal. Same thing with your horse. If you and the person on the ground haven't done this much before, do a little dress rehearsal about how you're going to do it. Who's going to be responsible for what? What's going to happen? Okay, so use that person on the ground. I've started colts just about every way that there is to start colts. And this is the way that I use that Gordon McKinley showed me. And it's the way that I found is the safest and gets you the best results, okay? Very, very few horses will ever want to buck when you use 2 people on the ground to get their feet moving. And if they do go to buck, you've got that security of that person can step out in front and take control of that situation rather than you being in the deep end by yourself. I make no mistakes. There is no safer way to start a colt than the way that I've showed you on this DVD. I've tried every single one of them. I've been to colt starting clinics from every clinician you can ever imagine. I've seen how they do it. I'm just telling you, this is by far the best way. See, I've been to lots of other clinics and videotapes of people doing colt starting clinics all over the world, and they don't care if the horse bucks. I do. If you come to one of my colt starting clinics and your horse bucks and you stay on and you don't fall off, you still get an F as far as I'm concerned. If you've done a good job and you're a great horseman, you should have set that horse up to where he didn't ever want to buck. He shouldn't have wanted to buck in the first place. Okay, if you say, well, I can just ride that out of him. Well, you might be able to, but the 65-year-old lady down the road can't. And that's who you're going to make money from. That's who needs this kind of experience. That's who needs a horse that's broken quiet, is that lady that maybe has a little bit of inexperience and needs a confidence build. So you want to make sure that the colt you break in for her isn't going to buck her off when she gets it home. Okay, so make sure that you use 2 people. It's very much a safety issue. Just as crucial as having a helper in the round pen with you, make sure you get those horses really moving out well in the round pen first. In those first 2 or 3 rides, make sure you get them trotting and cantering, get their feet moved out. Okay? If you let those colts get lazy and get what I call sticky feet, then they get a sticky attitude, where they get real pinny-eared and they don't want to move out. Okay, another thing about that is don't stay in the round pen too long either. 2 rides and maybe the start of the 3rd ride. Beyond that, get them out into arena. Get them in a bigger area, okay? Like I said, in Australia, I didn't have an arena, so I used to go from the round pen straight to that dirt road like we did yesterday, okay? But get them moving out, because the more you keep them confined in a small area, it demotivates them from wanting to move out, because they're like, well, what's the point? I'm only just going to keep going around this tiny little circle. I never get to go anywhere, okay? When you let your horses walk for the first week or 2 under saddle, and that's what a lot of people do, they just walk them. Well, it's a little bitty 2-year-old, and I've got to be very careful of his fragile bones, and I'm only just going to walk him for the first 2 weeks, okay? And then we're going to do a little trot and then a little canter. Well, you'll find most horses will do the walk and trot without too much of an attitude. But you ask them to do the nasty word, the canter, oh, then the devil child comes out. Because when you ask a horse to canter that's fat, lazy, and disrespectful, he hates that, because he knows cantering means losing weight, okay? They're lazy, they don't want to lose weight. So when you ask them to canter, they're going to kick up and crow hop, they might buck, they'll pin their ears. You can think your sweet little 2-year-old just turned into the devil child overnight, okay? But from the very beginning, when you get on them, if you just show them that walk, trot, canter is expected from the first ride onwards, they don't know any different, okay? You know, I remember one time, I went to dinner with another couple, and they had a little boy there, was about 3, and he sat up at the table there for about, we were there probably this restaurant for about 2.5 hours, and this kid just sat in this high chair, never made hardly any noise. He was just playing with a couple little toys that they brought for him just on the table, just little things like that. Never heard boo out of this kid, okay? I mean, he was perfect. And I had some other friends of mine that I knew that had a kid, and I mean, this thing is rank, okay? If they didn't put a DVD player on the table as soon as they got to a restaurant to shut this kid up, okay, this thing was like the devil child, and I couldn't do anything because I wanted to beat the hell out of the kid, but I just had to shut my mouth. Well, I said to this couple, I said, how come your kid acts so good there? Like, why, you know, we've been here 2.5 hours, and this little boy has never made a sound, he's been polite, not a problem at all. And the parents looked at me and they said, well, we never expected anything else. He doesn't know any other way to act. From the time he was born, we took him to restaurants and he had to toe the line. If he didn't toe the line, we took him outside and whipped his ass a few times and brought him back in until he figured out it was much easier being at the table than what it was going outside with Dad. Because if you went outside with Dad, it wasn't fun. It's much easier sitting at the table minding your own business. Okay? So that kid never knew any different. He never knew he was allowed to misbehave. Well, the other kid, that kid, all that knew kid was to pitch a fit at the table and somebody was going to give him a DVD player to shut him up, okay? When you ride a 2-year-old for the first time, they don't know what's expected. So walk, trot, and canter. And then they're like, well, that's what human beings, they get on my back, we walk, trot, and canter. Okay, I can deal with that. And you might say, well, Clinton, I don't feel as I'm a confident rider to walk, trot, and canter. I'm not that good of a rider. Honestly, if you honestly think that, you shouldn't be starting a colt anyway. You should not be riding a 2-year-old unless you feel confident you can walk, trot, and canter. Because the biggest way to get in a wreck on a colt is when they jump or they take off and you grip with your legs and grip with the reins, okay, and you lose your balance. It's the biggest way to start a wreck with your horses, okay? So get them moved out from the very beginning. It'll free up their mind and it'll really get them quiet. Now remember, mate, the more you've been acting like you've been drinking when you ride, the better. Don't be quiet on them. Move around on them, slap them, okay? Pull on that back cinch, move all over them, okay? Remember from the first ride, I was always moving on these horses. When you're moving on them from the beginning, waving your legs, waving your arms, again, they don't expect anything different. But when you sit up there really still and prim and proper and don't make much noise or move, 2 weeks later, when you throw your arm up and say, hey Frank, how you doing? Your horse is gonna jump, spook, and dump you on your head. Okay, so the more relaxed you are and the more you move around, the quieter they get. The stiller you sit and the more sneaky you are, the spookier they get, I guarantee it. In the first probably 10 rides, try to make sure if you're just sitting on them at a standstill, make sure you're always flexing them or doing something to them that they know you're there. Don't just sit there and do nothing and start chatting with your buddy or talking on your phone. Because what'll happen is they'll fall asleep for 5-6 minutes and they'll forget you're up there. And then all of a sudden you'll move or you'll put your hand on the neck or you'll lean back and touch them on the butt and they'll wake up in a hurry, snorting and drop you on your head. Okay, Gordon McKinley told me that when I first went to work for him, and I hadn't had any experience starting colts when I started with him, and I believed him, I believed everything he said, but usually when you're young, you're stupid too, okay? So just for whatever reason, I was just inexperienced and stupid that I sat on a colt that only had about 4 rides, and I sat there in a big old loose rein at a clinic one time just talking with a buddy of mine, and I sat there for about 10 minutes, and all of a sudden I said, okay, well, I better go back to work, and I squeezed him and clucked, and I mean, that mare woke up in a hurry, and she dumped me on my head hard too. I never ever did that mistake again, okay? You know, they say it's a wise man to learn from his mistakes, okay, or his pain, and then they say it's a wiser man to learn from somebody else's. Well, try to learn from mine if you can. Learn from all the areas that I've screwed it up so that you don't have to make the same problem. So I'm not saying you can't sit on them, but just be moving on them a lot, okay? I'm not saying, you can't go 5 seconds, but just move around and don't let them forget you're up there. That's the most important thing, okay? Make sure when you're getting on and off these colts, mate, for the first couple of weeks, you get on and off up by their shoulder. Don't step off back near their flank in case they jump forward and cow kick you and they'll kick in the guts, okay? The shoulder is the safest place to be when getting on and off a horse, especially something that's a little bit wild or a little bit spooky in some areas. Stay up there by the shoulder. Now, when I first get on and off, I get a lot of bend in their neck, okay? So if I went to take off, I've already got a good chance of bending their head around and getting them to disengage their hindquarters. As they get quieter from probably the 9th or 10th ride onwards, every day I'll usually take a little bit less bend in their head until eventually I can get on them straight, okay? But wean themselves onto that. Don't go from their head being bent all the way around like this to perfectly straight. Next time you get on, do it about there, and then the next time do it about there, and then the next time there, and then finally he can be straight. But kind of ease him into that and you'll find that you won't get into any sort of problems. It's extremely important, mate, with these 2-year-olds or young colts to be consistent. Consistency is your greatest ally, inconsistency is your greatest enemy, okay? So when we know we're gonna saddle a colt for the first time, we try not to give them a day off in the first 14 days, okay? From when we start saddling them, we like to work with them preferably every day for 14 days, not give them one day off. Because it's that inconsistency that will always get you into trouble, okay? The biggest problem is saddling them for a day or two, getting them good, and then don't saddle them for 3 or 4 days. And then when you come back and saddle them again, what do they want to do? They want to buck with the saddle again. Or giving them a couple of rides and then a week off. Well, then when you go back to ride them again, they act like they've never been ridden again. Get that consistency going. So I'm not saying that we've never given one a break in 14 days. Of course that we have at different times, okay? But we try to plan our schedule that if I'm gonna start a colt, we know we're gonna be around home for 14 days in a row to get that consistency. Usually what I find, if you've got 14 days in a row on your colt, from saddling him to riding him, and then you give him a couple of days off and you come back and saddle him, he couldn't care less about that saddle. He's completely relaxed with it. When you ride him, he's like, yeah, I know what that means. That's not a big deal either. Again, it's that consistency. And sometimes if they're a bit of a problem child or I'm not really making the progress I want, I'll work them twice a day. No harm in that, okay? When they start getting with the program, I back off back to once a day again, okay? But again, put those miles under their feet and give them that consistency. One of the biggest things that I try to get across people on starting colts is keep it simple. Horses are very smart, but they're a very simple creature, okay? I put horses mentally into the age group of kids between, say, 4 and 6. Kids between 4 and 6 are very smart. I mean, they catch on quick, don't they? They don't, not only do they catch on to the good things quickly, but they catch on to the bad things just as quickly, okay? But even though kids are smart between the ages of 4 and 6, they're also very simple, meaning that you can't confuse them by teaching them 15 different lessons all in the same lesson. Okay, meaning that you don't teach them the alphabet and how to spell their name and put sentences in together all in the same lesson. You teach them the alphabet first. You get that good. Okay, then you teach them what the letters sound like, and then you teach them what letters go into their name. And then you teach them the order of the letters that go into their name. Okay, and then you put 2 words together and then 3 words and you build on it. And when you do it like that, they catch on really quickly. But if you try to confuse them by putting too many things in there, they can't comprehend them. So keep it simple. Like, for example, the cruising lesson. When we come out here and we ask them to cruise around at the trot and canter, people ask me all the time, well, aren't you worried about what lead they're on? Aren't you worried about where their head is? No, I'm not. The colt's had 4 rides, okay? He's been loping around on a wrong lead in the pasture for most of his life. It's not going to make any more difference 2 more days, okay? You know, they get hung up on all these details. Let's keep something basic, okay? Step 1, get him to go forward. Step 2, get him to go forward for an extended amount of time. Step 3, get him to go forward in the same direction. You know, start making it more technical as he progresses. Yeah, but everybody wants their horse to lope slow with his head down on the correct lead on a circle, all in the first session. How about we just get him comfortable wearing the human being? How about that for a step? And then the second step would be, okay, now can you maintain your own momentum? And you build on it from there. So keep it simple for them. When you keep it simple, man, they make progress very, very quickly. As soon as you make it too complicated, they'll get confused and your progress, your learning curve will be greatly slowed down, okay? You know, I mean, it just takes a lot longer. Another big mistake that I see people making when they start 2-year-olds is overfeeding them, okay? When we start a colt, we pretty much just put them on a hay diet for the first 2 to 3 weeks, okay? And we don't give them any grain. I'd rather the horse lose a little bit of weight and be a little bit lethargic than be full of beans and vinegar and be constantly fresh and wanting to feel his oats too much. I want to ride the horse, not the feed. Okay, so initially they are going to probably lose some weight because they've never been used to being worked before. So they're going to drop some of their weight, okay? I'm okay with that. I don't want them to be a bag of bones, of course, so don't take this out of contents, but I don't mind if they drop some weight. I'd rather them drop some weight and be riding good or acting good, and then after 2 to 3 weeks when I feel like, yep, they're good with the saddle, they're good with the rider, they're riding good, then I'll slowly start to bump them back up on their grain. Now, I usually give my horses as much hay as they want to eat because if I don't do that, they for sure will lose too much weight, okay? But basically, if you overfeed them, they're going to come out of their stall every day feeling that energy, and you're going to have to get all that silliness out of them first, so don't overfeed them. Most people's problem, in all honesty, not just in starting colts, but in horsemanship in general, most people overfeed and underwork. They're feeding their horses way too much and not working them anywhere near enough, okay? So do the opposite initially. Overwork them, underfeed them a little bit, and then you can build their weight back up to where you need it to be, okay? Another thing that I tell people, you know what? A tired colt is a good colt. I've never seen a tired colt get anybody in trouble. Look at this donkey just walking along here. He's just quiet, his ears are back towards me, focused on me. Watch, if I sit and relax, he stops. He's a little lazy now, but I kind of like that just a little bit. I can easily wake him up again. Like I'll slap him on the shoulder if I feel like he's not paying attention to me here. But he's very laid back, which is good. That's how he should be. This is, you know, it won't be another week and I can put a 65-year-old lady on the trail and slap this thing on the butt and say, take care of her, and he's just going to mosey on down the trail. Because he's had some miles put under his feet already. Even though we only took him outside yesterday for the first time, he's had quite a few miles in the arena put on him, okay? So a tired colt is a good colt, okay? Have you ever noticed when your horse is having a fun time, you're usually not? You ever notice when your horse is bucking and kicking and snorting and got his ears up and he's looking around and he's having the greatest fun of his life, you're hanging on for your dear life, okay? Ever notice when your horse is not really having that much fun, you're having a great time? Like right now, he doesn't look like he's having that much fun, meaning that he's not looking around and spooking and shying, and he's not thinking, I want to race around here and kick up my heels. He's thinking, you know what? I want to do as little steps as I possibly can to get back to the next feed time. Okay, so he's relaxed right now and I'm having a great time. Come on, let's get going. I feel very safe. But if he came out here kind of snorting and looking around and overfed and breathing fire, okay, when he's having fun, you're not. And I don't want people to take that out of context, because somebody will. They'll say, well, Clinton Anderson wants his horses to hate being worked with. That's not what I'm saying here, okay? I'm just saying these are general comments. When your horse is having a good time, you're usually not. When your horse is nice and relaxed and quiet and he don't want to go anywhere too fast, you're usually very confident. You ever notice you feel more confident pushing a horse forward than what you do, hopefully, than what you do riding one that you're always trying to slow down and stay on and not get killed? Okay, that's what I'm trying to get you to avoid, is having that feeling. Something that's inevitable that's going to happen to you, especially if you start enough colts, is that at some point some of them are going to get some girth gall, okay, where their hair is going to get rubbed and the skin's going to get rubbed to where they get a little sore on their side, and they're going to be uncomfortable wearing the saddle, okay? That's mainly because they've never had a girth or a saddle on them, so their skin is very soft and tender right behind their elbow there, okay? So once that skin toughens up a little bit and it gets a little bit of a callus to it, okay, then obviously the girth gall is not going to bother them again. Here's two things that I'll tell you, okay? Before I came out with this and designed this ultimate performance cinch, okay, which is cut away right where the horse's elbows are. Since I've started using this girth on the colts, I've noticed a tremendous amount of decrease in the horses that would get girth gall, because there's just not that much friction there. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to eliminate all girth gall, but it's certainly taken it way, way down, okay? Like if I would start 10 colts previously, 10 different colts, all different types of breeds and ages and things like that, I would probably have maybe 6 or 7 colts will get some form of girth gall, okay? Some are going to get it kind of bad, where you might have to quit saddling them for a week or two and let it heal up, okay? And then 2 or 3 of them won't get anything at all. Since I've been using the ultimate performance cinch, out of 10 colts that I'd start, maybe 2 or 3 of them might get a little bit of girth gall, and that's about it, okay? But what I'll do is keep that Corona ointment on their side. Every day when I go to saddle them up, I'll put some Corona ointment on there, because it keeps it nice and soft and well lubricated. If it kind of breaks the skin and it's looking a little bit red, I'll spray Vetricin on it twice a day as well, and that'll really heal it up as well. Most of the time, if they've got girth gall and it's not real bad, I just keep working with them every day and just keep saddling them and go on with it, and within 2 or 3 weeks it heals up by itself. Every once in a while, you're going to get a colt that gets it pretty bad, where they'll swell up and they'll be so sore when you pull that girth up that it starts causing other problems. Like they want to start fidgeting when you're doing the girth up, and they don't want to stand still, and they want to back up, and they get pinny-eared because it hurts, of course, okay? If it's really that bad, you got to kind of stop training them for a week or two, at least saddling them. I might keep doing my groundwork, but I'm going to quit saddling them for a week or two, keep doctoring it, let that skin toughen up, and then you'll never look back and you'll go again. You know, when I started colts for a living in Australia, it was a bit of a pain in the neck, because, you know, you can't charge somebody if you're not riding their horse. So, you know, I did everything I possibly could to make sure I could keep riding that horse and keep training it so I could keep charging my customers. But sometimes it just gets bad enough that you need to stop. You know, in Australia, we're just a bunch of rednecks. We just use mutton, you know, lamb's fat, mutton fat. We'd slaughter a bunch of sheep and things, and we just boil up that mutton fat, and we just gotta keep it in an old tin, and we just get a handful of that and whack it on their side, and that worked real good too, okay? Not real sellable, but it did work, okay? So, you know, we just do things like that to help with it, but it's inevitable that it's going to happen with colts when you first start them. But once their skin toughens up, they're usually in pretty good shape, mate. One of the greatest things that Gordon McKinley ever taught me about starting colts, and just horses in general, but especially colts, he said, if you truly want a great broke horse, you got to give him those 3 equal doses. Remember? Long rides, bring him back with wet saddle pads, and give him concentrated training. And you need those 3 equal doses, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. When you can balance that act and you can get it done well, you truly end up with a great, great horse. But if you only get one of those thirds working for you, or 2 of them working and the other one not, you're going to have some holes in your program. There is no doubt about that, okay? Gordon McKinley, in my mind, had the biggest influence on me in starting colts, because that's where I learned all these methods from, okay, is starting colts from him, the groundwork, the safety first, all that kind of stuff. You know, I always refer to him as king of the round pen. I've never seen anybody that could step into a round pen with a wild horse and within an hour later have it caught, saddled, and ready for somebody to ride. And I don't hold a candle in the wind as good as he was at doing that, that's for sure. I'm good, but he was great. And that's something that, you know, when he passes on, that just disappears with him at that particular point. You know, people talk about some different great colt starters and so forth over here, and there are some really good colt starters over here. There's no doubt about it. Ray Hunt was one of them, and there's some good guys out here. But Gordon McKinley, when it came to really wild, tough horses, he could get inside their mind and get so much done so quickly that you just look and you think, well, how did he get that done? And it's because he knew how to get inside of a horse's mind. Ian Francis had a lot of the same qualities. Ian Francis, he didn't have to fight with a colt to get him to do anything. He could get inside their mind and get them to cooperate usually 9 times out of 10 without any real fuss at all, okay? So I encourage you, when you're working with your horses, keep those 3 things in mind: long rides, wet saddle pads, and concentrated training. Remember, don't overfeed them and underwork them. Do the opposite: overwork them, underfeed them. Give them miles and consistency, and as long as you follow the down under horsemanship method, I know that you're going to have great success with your horses, mate. Colt starting to me is one of the greatest things that I love to do with horses. I love to start colts because it's like this fresh blackboard. Nobody's messed it up. Nobody's given the horse any bad habits. But even though it's a lot of fun and it's tremendously rewarding, starting colts can be very dangerous at times, and especially if you do it incorrectly or you make major mistakes. So please watch the videos 2 or 3 times, take notes, use your arena mates, take them to the barn with you and use the arena mates, study the down under horsemanship method. Okay, when you do those things, I know I'm going to keep you safe. Don't get on until you've prepared for your horse first. Well, listen, mate, it's time for Ransom and I to head off down the road. I'm going to give him his second ride out down the road. He's turned into a great horse, a long way from where we started, where he was wild and spooky and didn't want to be caught and pulling against the halter and the lariat. That's just part of him being wild. He looks far from being wild right now. Take care of yourselves, guys. I appreciate your respect, and again, good luck with all your colts in the future.